I'm your moderator, Sandro Manetti, BAFTA LA's own, and it's my privilege to talk today with an actor whose career has won admiration for its excellence, longevity, and class. And with his latest performance in Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods, he's at the forefront of awards buzz. Welcome, Delroy Lindo. And Delroy, hello there. Welcome to see you. Please unmute so we can all hear you. Now, many in our audience, hello, Delroy. Many in our audience may be unaware that you were actually born and raised in England. So how did those formative years in Southeast London first put you on the path to an acting career, if indeed they did?
They did indirectly, in as much as I have known since I was I had a feeling since I was very young that I wanted to be an actor. I do not come from a family of actors. I do not come from a family that has anything to do with the entertainment industry. It's a really good question. I can't necessarily say that there is a direct connection between Southeast London, my experiences there, and my becoming an actor. But I have certainly used in my work all of my whole life experiences, which include the time that I was in the UK. Does that answer your question?
It does. As a teenager, you moved to North America, and in San Francisco, you studied acting at the American Conservatory Theatre. So what lessons did you learn there that still sustain you in your career today?
Interestingly, it is a lesson. Okay, I'm going to bifurcate my answer. The first thing that came to mind when you asked me that question was a fundamental element that I did not learn as a result of my experience at ACT. And that component that I did not learn has to do with the interconnectedness of the industry. And I did not know that as fully as I should have. And it impacted my career adversely.
How so?
Everybody talks to everybody in this industry. It is a surprisingly small industry in actuality. When one thinks of, I know this is a BAFTA event, and perhaps I'm speaking less about the industry in Europe, but certainly in Hollywood, even in North America, it's a small industry in as much as everybody talks to everybody. And if one is being considered to be hired for a job, the first thing, or one of the first things that producers and or directors or all of the above will do is speak to the people that one has worked with prior to find out how was your experience working with this person. And I made a fairly significant misstep in my understanding of the industry. And that is that I thought the industry, and laugh now if you wish, I thought the industry was a meritocracy. And it is profoundly not, it is profoundly not a meritocracy. So I've had to learn over the years the various components that constitute maintaining a career over and above the talent that one has and the talent that one is bringing to the table. Having said that, let me answer the first part of your question in terms of practically what I did learn. The American Conservatory Theater was, I'm not sure about now, but a classically oriented institution, meaning there was a strong emphasis, particularly in the second year, my second year of study, a strong emphasis placed on the European classics, Shakespeare, Ibsen, Chekhov, etc. I would say specifically in terms of Shakespeare and learning and developing techniques to deal with the language, the basics of iambic pentameter, how iambic pentameter connects to the technical aspect, the technical and emotional aspects of what is being said. I was introduced to those techniques. And broadly speaking, the fact that I took the time to be trained has stood me in very, very good stead in terms of the longevity of my career. And lastly, I would say that the components that have, and this is not an anti-training comment I'm about to make, but I would say that the most important and critical things that I learned in terms of the longevity of my career, I have learned in context of actually working as an actor. But certainly my training gave me a base, a foundation, particularly when I was starting my career.
Well, yes, you also learn by working, and you made your film debut, I think I'm right in saying, in the 1976 John Candy film, Find Your Lady. What are your memories of first being on a film set? Did you feel naturally at home, or did you feel all at sea? And how much of a learning experience was it for you to be on a film set?
I was excited. It was phenomenal that I was being paid to do this. I had really a sub bit part in that film. I remember John Candy, but I remember, and again, that's a very good question, and it's going back so many years. But I remember, because I was in a couple of crowd scenes, I think I was in perhaps a party scene. I was in a scene with a lot of other background actors. And that aspect was kind of exciting and interesting. But I can't say that I recall, as I am fumbling for words right now, that's indicative of the fact that I can't say that I learned anything. I probably did, but I can say that it was the whole idea, the concept that I was being paid for this in and of itself was a boost. And in actuality, I mean, a boost to my whole concept of what this could be. But this being an acting career. But because I was very much at the beginning, I'm not necessarily sure that I was processing all of that in those terms. I'm quote unquote processing it retrospectively in response to your answer.
Mm. After a couple of more films, you put your screen career on hold to spend 10 years focused on theatre acting, and very successfully. By 1988, you were a Tony nominee for a play by August Wilson, someone whose work would have a big impact on your career. Tell us about that grounding in stage work and how you're able to develop your skills.
Okay. The screen froze, Sandro.
Oh, I was saying that you left film for 10 years and focused on theatre. Tell us about that grounding in stage and how you're able to develop your skills.
I'm smiling because of the way you put that question. And it's been put to me in the past pretty
Are you
much.
saying it wasn't a choice? Yes.
I mean, I'm absolutely saying it was not. I did not make a choice to put my film career
I
on
thought you were
hold.
putting craft above commerce, Delroy. Was that not the case?
Well, I was. That is accurate, but it was not. First of all, it is not as if I had a booming film career to put on hold, because I absolutely did not. However, as a result of having trained at ACT and have, as a result of deciding consciously to go back to New York as opposed to going to Los Angeles, I was absolutely making a choice to concentrate on my craft. And philosophically, and I do remember this very clearly, I made a choice, a conscious choice, to attempt to start my career in New York because I did want to concentrate on theater. I felt that working in the theater would give me a much more firm and broad-based learning experience. I wanted to be able to do, if possible, a range of parts, which I felt I had more chance of achieving that working in the theater. I do remember thinking that if I went to Los Angeles, because of the way I look, I would much more easily be typecast. And so for me, it was very much about doing the work. And that's what caused me to start my career in New York, working in the theater. And it has proven to be so. My experiences working for 10 years as a theater actor, some of those elements have stood me in very good stead working for the camera.
Yes, it certainly put you on the path back to Hollywood, and you've been able to have a variety of roles on screen while avoiding typecasting. In the 90s, you had such a string of memorable film roles in the
I
likes
think
of...
we've probably both frozen. You are frozen again.
In the 90s,
Sandra.
you were in the likes of Get Shorty, Ransom, A Life Less Ordinary, The Cider House Rules, a wide variety of roles. How do you look back on this period of becoming an established presence in so many good films?
I should say that you froze. I did not hear the first part of your question, but I think you're asking me how the work that I did and some of the films that you mentioned, how it was for me during that phase of my career. Is that?
Yes, and playing such a variety of roles. Yes.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted. Moving to New York and working in the theater, I felt that it would cause me to have range as an actor. It would tackling the various different parts that I tackled in the theater, I wanted to believe was broadening my range as an actor. And I directly took the skills that I learned and transferred them to film. And that's, I think, exactly the reason why I was able to establish a reputation, perhaps, for being versatile. And in fact, I remember when I met Barry Sonnenfeld, the director of Get Shorty. He and I met in Los Angeles, and the casting director was in the room with us. And the casting director asked me a question. I don't remember the question, but I remember my response. My response was, well, I think that I'm different from part to part to part. I think I'm able to bring different qualities depending on what the demands of the part that I'm playing and the material that I'm working on are. And Barry Sonnenfeld agreed that yes, you're different from film to film to film, and that was that was an affirmation in that moment. Um, of exactly, it was an affirmation for how I had attempted up to that point to construct my career, um, working in the theater as a base. And the fact that I worked in the theater exposed me to different kinds of work.
Around this time, Spike Lee enters your life. He cast you in Crooklyn, Malcolm X, and Clockers. What appealed to you about this filmmaker that made that such a good working relationship that you've returned to again and again?
Yeah, the variety of the work. If you look at, it was Malcolm X, then it was Crooklyn, then it was Clockers. And those three parts, the parts that he offered me, well, I auditioned for Malcolm X, and Spike offered me Crooklyn and Clockers. If you look at those three parts, they're very different. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Spike had sufficient confidence in me to simply say, yes, I understand you can play this part, and I want you to play this part, and I'm going to pay you to play this part. Such an affirmation. And what I've always felt from Spike, in addition to the confidence that he has demonstrated in me as an actor, I've always been clear from him, with him, as to the story that he wants to tell and how he wants to go about telling that story, and therefore how the part that I was playing, whatever part I was playing, connected to the overall story that he wanted to tell. There is an ease and a shorthand of communication that we have that pretty much I've had from the beginning, Malcolm X, that is affirming and makes the work. It doesn't make the work any less hard in terms of the manner in which one must apply oneself to the work. But I'm always very clear about the direction that Spike wants to take the work in and what my connection to that direction is.
Hope you're all enjoying this BAFTA masterclass with Delroy Lindo. If you have a question for our guest, please type it into the Q&A box below on your screen. I see several questions coming in. I'll try and get to all of them a bit later in the order that I see them. So thanks, and please continue to send in those questions. Now, Delroy, a true highlight of your career came when you guest starred in The Simpsons as a social worker, trying to make the family more functional. How did that experience change the perception of you as an actor, if only with younger members of your own family?
With younger members of my own family, my nieces and nephews, I had instant cred. I had instant credibility as a result of doing, and I'm actually being really serious. Oh my God, Uncle D, you did The Simpsons? Oh, wow. Because at that point, and at that point, The Simpsons was, I don't know if it was at the height of its popularity, but it had been on the air for many years. It was a very high profile program. With younger people, I had instant credibility.
Talking of great television roles, you've done 39 episodes of that excellent legal series, The Good Fight. Now, tell us what it's like to be part of such a talented ensemble like that, and if the regularity of TV series work appeals to you at all.
The core company of actors on The Good Fight all come from the theater. Therefore, there is what I want to call an ethic that surrounds the work that is really refreshing. I have learned, so that's probably first and foremost, or among the most attractive and rewarding aspects of working on The Good Fight. The writers and showrunners, Michelle and Robert King, are extremely experienced, obviously, and therefore they have a way of working, a mode of working, and they have had a response to me when I first started doing that work that was quite collaborative.
Mhm.
And when I say collaborative, what I mean more specifically is I have always felt when I was working on The Good Fight that my opinions were listened to, taken into account in terms of the work process. It did not always mean that my opinions were included if I had a thought about the work, that they were incorporated into the work.
I see.
Thought about a line or an idea, the Kings would listen, and quite often they would incorporate what I had to say into the work, as long as I made sure that whenever I was making a suggestion that I wanted to change a line, I made sure that it did not adversely impact another actor that I was in the scene with. And that actually, and I'm thinking about this now, that actually is a skill, quote unquote, that I developed, I think, that also has stood me in good stead in terms of being part of a company, being a member of an ensemble, and being sensitive to what the needs of another actor might be in a given scene that I am in, even when I, as fundamental as change a line. So it's helped me to develop that TV muscle. As we all know, probably, TV is very fast. It's really fast. And so, and again, this goes back to my theater training and the ethic that I learned and developed as a result of working in the theater, which is very simple, which is being prepared. Certainly, I have prided myself on being prepared in my film work, for sure. But in theater, I'm sorry, in TV, it is much more important, because there simply is no time. When you show up on set, you have to be ready to hit your mark. A rehearsal in television usually constitutes going through the scene one time before we shoot the scene. And so it behooves one to have done one's homework and to be ready to work. And I have more acutely developed that muscle, but I have had the ability to develop that muscle as a result of all the work that I've done, but certainly the ethic that I learned, developed working in the theater.
And you are certainly prepared for The Five Bloods. You have the role of a lifetime, and you're able to pour all those experiences from your career into this incredible performance as Paul, a Vietnam veteran in a MAGA hat. What I want to ask you about this from an acting point of view is, how are you able to empathize with a character whose particular views and worldview you don't share yourself? This is a question a lot of actors have found. You're not a Trump fan, I understand, but you have to play this devotee in the movie. So what is the preparation to find the empathy that goes into that performance?
great question. And the thing that immediately came to mind, I did a film for television many, many years ago. I was playing Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, also a man whose views are pretty much diametrically opposed to my own. But to your question, one must seek to find, must work to find common ground with whatever character one is playing. In the instance of Clarence Thomas, I read a lot of material on him. And in one of the books that I read, I came across some information that they were talking about in this book, how he was an outsider, how when he was young, a lot of his friends, when they would be out playing baseball or fooling around in ways that kids do, he was not that kid. Oftentimes he had his head buried in a book. There was certain aspects of his family life that I actually related to, some things that some experiences he had as a young person that I understood based on my experience. That was my key in. That was my way in to empathize with this person. Similarly with Paul. What I came to understand about Paul, important to understand, Paul volunteered for Vietnam, 3 tours. I volunteered out of a sense of love and responsibility to my country. Coming back to America, the rejection that I experienced, the loss in my life of that I had experienced, of my wife in childbirth, the fact that I have such a fractious relationship with my son, which is a certain kind of loss, the things that need to be repaired, the extent to which I feel disenfranchised, disconnected from my own life, from my world, and from myself, ultimately. So that in 2015, when this individual comes along and says broadly, I feel your pain, I understand, and I can make it better, I am ripe to believe that. I need to believe that there is this person, this force, this set of circumstances that is going to help me correct my life and get my life on a more even keel, and also importantly, to grant to me, to give to me more of what I feel I deserve. And so they are some of the elements that caused me to be able to empathize very strongly with Paul, to the point where I could wear that MAGA hat, believe in my wearing of that MAGA hat, and believe in what it stood for, even though it absolutely was a struggle for me. It was a process, I would say, of coming to that place, but I was able to come to that place of understanding and empathy.
I'd now like to go to the audience Q&A questions, and the first one of them is related to the Five Bloods. It's from Erica James. Erica says, you worked with the late, great Chadwick Boseman, who was a hero to most, including myself as a Black woman director and actor. What do you treasure the most about having known and worked with Chadwick?
His openness, graciousness, generosity of spirit, as a person in general, but more specifically, how he demonstrated those things toward my son. My wife and my son came to visit while we were in Thailand, and I will forever remember how gracious Chadwick was toward my then 17-year-old son. But that was indicative of his generosity of spirit, his generosity, his sensitivity, his capacity to empathize. He had those qualities as a person, and he brought those qualities to bear in his work. But just the fact that he was just very, very friendly and open toward my son, and I will forever be. That's the first thing that always comes to mind when people ask me about Chadwick. I will also say that, and I've said this kind of sort of countless times at this point. The last scene in Bloods, the scene at the stream where Chadwick and I come together, which is the culminating scene between our two characters. That last scene was Chadwick's first day of work. And we both were prepared, 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 and prepared. He would have to be, in order to tell the story of the scene. I had to be, of course, but the difference between Chadwick's experience on the film up to that point and my experience on the film up to that point is that I had been working on the film for 5 weeks or so. By the time we did, so I was more conversant with who Paul is, who he was. It was literally Chadwick's first day of work, and he was prepared. He was ready, which speaks to the magnitude of not only of his talent, but of his ethic. And I keep using that word, as an actor. So there's something to cherish.
Thanks for that insight, and thanks for that question. Adam L. Hagar wants to follow up on what you were saying earlier about your working relationship.
Thank you for the question. I believe the first person's name is Erica.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Now, Adam L. Hagar wants to know, what makes Spike Lee unique among the directors you've worked with when it comes to working with actors?
Thank you for that, Adam. Clarity. What makes Spike unique? Clarity of approach to the work. As I mentioned, he's really clear about the story he wants to tell and how he wants to tell it. That in turn imparts a clarity to the actor in terms of, I use the analogy of a train. When you get on that train, you know the direction that the train is going in. It does not mean that one is clear about how to get there, but one is absolutely clear about the approach to the work, and therefore what the approach, the approach that one is being demanded of one as an actor. There's a clarity. I would also say that, and I would say it's an acute, it's an acute clarity. It's very clear. It's very sharp. I would also say that from a cultural point of view, it's rewarding, stimulating, challenging certainly, but rewarding and stimulating to be on a train, to continue that analogy, to be on a train in which everybody that's on that train, we're all going in the same direction. We may have different ways of getting there, but we're all going in the same direction. And as I have said in the past, I've never had to, with Spike, I've never had confusion about the story that's being told. Never. And that's very comforting. And it makes my job easier from the standpoint that I'm really clear about the direction that the train is going in. Now, certainly I have worked with other directors that have a clarity, but with Spike, for me, what's unique, to use your term, Adam, what's unique is that I cannot recall ever having to internally translate something he has said to me. Okay, now does he mean this or does he mean this? Or maybe he means this. Spike, I've never had to go through that process. I'm clear about the arena, the train that we're on, the arena that we're in. And I want to be, and I think that for me is unique to my particular working relationship with Spike. As I always say, it does not mean that issues don't come up in the work from him as a director toward me as an actor, or vice versa. But I'm really clear about the arena that we're in, the train that we're on, the journey that we're attempting to take. And that's unique.
Our next question comes from TD in Southeast London. He asks what advice you have for Black creatives looking to succeed in the industry who feel their opportunities are limited and capped in the UK. Do they need to move to the USA to achieve their dreams? What do you think?
TD. The short answer is, first of all, TD, it's a great question. Moving to the United States is absolutely what worked for me. I know, having spoken to various other actors, that is the move they felt they needed to make. To leave in order to broaden the opportunities. If you have the opportunity to leave and that is what you feel you must do, then I would say yes. Listen to yourself, trust your instincts, and conduct yourself accordingly. If you have a feeling, TD, that you need to leave and you are able to leave in order to broaden your career opportunities, then yes, leave if you are able. I would also say, because I am aware of the relative lack of opportunity for Black actors in the UK, and I'm saying that based on various conversations that I've had with various actors in America and in the UK. However you situate yourself, and this is critical, continue to say yes to yourself when many others may be saying no. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And, you know, I would say that that's important for any actor, any person, anywhere on the planet. but to Southeast London TD, wherever you are right now, and whatever it is that you are confronting, having to confront, having to negotiate in your life, in your career, getting your career off the ground. Trust yourself, say yes to yourself all the time. And I don't mean to say yes to the point of being arrogant or big-headed, but I'm acutely aware of the obstacles and the frustrations that can come up. And it is very, very important to maintain, wherever you are, whomever you are, whatever you're doing, to maintain a strong sense of self and self-belief. However you construct that, organize that, create that for yourself.
Our next question comes from a screenwriter, Camilla Castri. What do you look for in scripts that makes you excited as an actor?
The simple answer, what's the person's name who asked
Camilla.
the question? Camilla?
Camilla.
Okay, Camilla, thank you for that question. What I'm looking for in a perfect world are characters, narratives that in some way illuminate the human condition. Say something about the human condition to me as a human being on the planet, and therefore to audiences. I have to say, Camilla, that there are lots of other things I could say I could flesh that answer out and say a lot of other things, but I think fundamentally, that's what I'm looking for. It's why I went to acting school. I went to acting school. I come from a generation, I'm on the tail end of a generation of actors coming out of the theater in my case, the late 1970s, that felt that theater could change the world. That's the ethos that I entered into my career at the beginning, believing that theater could change the world. And I modified that over the years. Theater may not be able to change the world per se. Film may not be able to change the world per se, but if one can be engaged in work that shifts how people think, that either creates or shifts a paradigm in terms of people's thinking, their perception, that's work that I want to be involved with. So the short answer is this work, is this a character that I'm playing that can illuminate the human condition in some way, shape, or form?
Delroy, you're a great actor and clearly, judging by these answers, a great mentor as well. Stefan wants to know, during your career, did you acquire a mentor? If so, who? And how much of an impact did this mentor have on you?
Unfortunately, no. I can't say that I had a mentor, which is part of the reason why it's really important to me. It's always been important to me to not to have a mentee per se, but to be as generous as I could with, in particular, younger actors. Whenever people come to me for advice, I try to be as generous with my time and with my spirit to engage, because I can't say that I unfortunately, I had a mentor. Now, having said that, I will say that when I arrived at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, ACT, as it is known, was divided into two parts. There was the acting company, and then there was the conservatory. I was a student in the conservatory. And the man who was the head of the conservatory, his name was Alan Fletcher. And Alan Fletcher, one of my first responsibilities, all of that, the students in my first year at ACT, after we had been there for a few weeks, we worked on scenes, and the scene and we presented them to the community, and the scenes were critiqued. And I worked on a scene from a play called Day of Absence by Douglas Turner Ward. And Alan Fletcher was the first person to say, and in critiquing the work that I had done in the scene, Day of Absence, Alan Fletcher said, Delroy has wonderful, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but generally what he said was, he mentioned my concentration. He said that I had the ability to concentrate on what I was doing. And he said, as a result of his ability to concentrate, the audience watches him. And specifically, he was referring to the fact that in the scene, I mimed soaking my feet in a bowl of water. I didn't have the bowl or the water, but I thought that it would be a good thing that while I was doing the scene, I would be soaking my feet in this water. And he spoke about the success of that component of the scene because I was able to have the audience believe that my feet were in fact in this bowl of water, and my concentration. And that's the first time that anybody ever, oh, really? I can concentrate? Oh, I didn't know that. He codified that aspect of my work. I would also say that the late, great Lloyd Richards, who for many years, Lloyd Richards, for those who do not know, was the original director, the director of the original production of A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry on Broadway back in 1959, I believe. That production is a storied production in the theater. Sidney Poitier, Claudia McNeil, Louis Gossett Jr., Diana Sands, all actors who went on to have majorly significant careers. And Lloyd was the director of that production. Lloyd then went on to become the dean of the Yale School of Drama in New Haven, Connecticut. In that capacity, Lloyd was responsible for, I was cast many years later, I was cast as Walter Lee, the part that Sidney Poitier had played. I was cast in the 25th anniversary production of A Raisin in the Sun. I was not very good, unfortunately, but as a result of Lloyd having seen my work in a play called Master Howell and the Boys, Lloyd invited me to come be a part of the 25th anniversary production of A Raisin in the Sun. And a few years later, and this proved to be very significant for me as an actor, he cast me in a play called Joe Turner's Come and Gone, a brilliant, brilliant August Wilson play. Lloyd also cast me, Lloyd was the director of that production, and Lloyd cast me in the lead, one of the co-leads, playing the part of Harold Loomis. And so Lloyd, while not necessarily being a mentor to me, cast a very significant influence at very critical times in my career. And I will say, just in closing to that question, that the fact that I appeared on Broadway in Joe Turner's Come and Gone on opening night, I didn't know this at the time, but I found out later, that there was a young man in the audience on opening night of Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and that young man's name was Spike Lee. And that was the first time Spike saw me as an actor. And so that began the relationship with Spike in film.
Our chat box is full of appreciation for the mentorship you're giving today.
Thank
TD
you.
among those saying how he looks forward to a journey of saying yes to himself. Our
Good to have.
next
I don't know if
question.
TD is male or female, but whomever you are, TD, good, good, and good. Yes.
Um, Adrienne Lowe asks, of all the film roles you've taken on, can you pick a favorite? And if so, why?
I cannot pick a favorite. I understand the question, and that's a fair question, but I cannot pick a favorite. My response to that question is usually that I have a number of parts that I have played that are especially significant to me and for me. And those parts are the second time that I played Walter Lee Younger in a production of A Raisin in the Sun at the Kennedy Center. The first production I did was at Yale Repertory Theater, and that was a production, unfortunately, in which I was not very good. Thank God I got a second opportunity to go back and play the part at the Kennedy Center in the mid 1980s, and I was much more successful, quote unquote. That is one of my all-time favorite work experiences. Playing Harold Loomis in the aforementioned Joe Turner's Come and Gone is the pinnacle of my experience as an actor in the theater. Will always be, I don't have the words to articulate how special that experience was. In film, all three parts that I played in Spike's films, however, West Indian Archie is right up there. Special to me. Rodney in Clockers, I mean, Woody Carmichael certainly in Crooklyn, but Rodney in Clockers, special to me because Rodney is so different from myself. West Indian Archie, because I am of Jamaican extraction, it was special for me to play a Jamaican on film and to be in a film that I revere myself. That was special. When I got to play Satchel Paige in a film called Soul of the Game, Satchel Paige was a very, very iconic, well-known, iconic pitcher in baseball. Playing Satchel Paige was very special for me, and it's a film that I'm very proud of. Mr. Rose in The Cider House Rules is special because that was also a part that I actually turned down when it was first offered to me. I had huge trepidation about playing that part because of the nature of who Mr. Rose is and what he does. I had huge trepidation, but I'm very proud of that work because that is also a piece of work that I felt, despite what he does, I was able to bring a certain humanity. And that was evidenced for me, to me. Many years ago, my wife and I were eating at a restaurant in Berkeley, California. We'd finished our meal, we were walking to our car, and a lady ran up to me in the street. She said, Mr. Lindo, I just saw you in the restaurant. I didn't want to disturb you, but thank you for your work in the Cider House Rules. The lady said to me, I myself was molested as a young girl, and I appreciate how you were able to, again, I don't remember all of her words, but I do remember her thanking me for my work in the Cider House Rules. I remember her saying that she had been molested as a young person and that I had humanized somehow not to the point where it made it okay what I did, but she mentioned that I'd humanized it in such a way that she was appreciative. And that has always meant the world to me. So Mr. Rose and the Cider House Rules, and now Paul, of course.
Mhm.
Not only, I mean, certainly from a commercial point of view in terms of the accolades, and that is tremendous. It's phenomenal. This last year, what has happened for me as a result of my playing Paul. But equally, if not more importantly, I would be proud of this work no matter what. And I can honestly say that. No matter what the response might have been, I would be deeply proud of this work. And the fact that vets have reached out to me and said how much they appreciate what I did in the film. And that really means the world to me. I have two cousins who are Vietnam vets. They were the first people that I spoke with when I knew I'd be doing this film. I spent time with my cousins. They were incredibly generous with me, telling me about their experiences in Vietnam. And what's interesting about my two cousins is that their experiences were very different in Vietnam. Very edifying. I mean, profoundly edifying, profoundly illuminating. And my spending time with them and the various other vets that I spoke with formed the foundation of my work on Paul. So the fact that vets have reached out to me and said how much and told me how much my work in the film means to them has added to how special my work is for me and for audiences in The Five Bloods.
You've been very generous with your time, Delroy. I want to get to 3 more questions in the minutes remaining. Kristen Peck says her favorite film of yours is This Christmas. She says, I love rewatching it around the holidays. Your character always breaks my heart with his kindness and acceptance. What I'm curious to know, in view of what you've said today, is how has your preparation for roles evolved over the span of your career?
How has the preparation? First of all, thank you for what's the person's name? Who asked the question?
It disappeared from my screen. Can you put it back, Bafta? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your response to This Christmas. How has my preparation changed, evolved over the course of my career? Is that the question?
It was Kristen, yes. Thank you, Kristen. Yes, that was the question. How has your preparation evolved?
Interestingly, fundamentally, it hasn't changed very much, in as much as I always engage, depending on the material, a lot of research, depending on what the demands of the material are. I always engage a physical and a vocal warm-up when I'm working. That was more critical in the theater when one has to reach the back of the theater, right? In terms of the evolution of my prep, I would say that I now have a shorthand with myself in terms of preparing. As an example, when I was doing in the theater, Walter Lee and Harold Loomis, for instance, I would arrive at the theater at least an hour before half hour. In the theater, for those of you, half hour is when, if it's an 8 o'clock curtain, I think it's different in England. You have a different curtain time, but here in America, curtain is 8 o'clock. Half hour actors are required to be at the theater a half hour before curtain. We call that half hour, 7:30. When I was working on Walter Lee and Harold Loomis, I would arrive at the theater at least an hour before half hour to start my physical and vocal warm-up. And that was an ethic, a way of working that I developed, and I carried that into whatever theater work I continued to do. In film and television, my preparation, although it still does involve a physical and vocal warm-up, I have a shorthand with myself. So the periods of my usually working in film, I will physically warm up before I get to the set. My vocal warm-up is much shorter, but there are vocal exercises that I do. There are some yogically oriented, and I don't say yoga, I say yogically oriented exercises that I do in my camper or in my dressing room prior to rehearsal. But those things that I do are shorter than when I was working in the theater. So I guess the answer to your question is I still have a preparation that I do that involve physical prep and vocal prep, but particularly when I'm working in film for the camera, it's shorter.
Maybe that answer relates partly to this next question. It's to do with the pandemic and how the industry is paused and lots of productions are cancelled or rescheduled. Akua wants to know, what advice would you give to actors on how to keep their skills sharp in this period when so many are not working?
Great question, Akua. How to keep your skills sharp. I don't know what discipline you're in, Akua. If you're an actor.
Acting, yes.
Okay. Keep yourself physically as sharp as you're able. So engage physical activity or physical exercise. That happens to be incredibly important for me. You know, I am fortunate. I have a gym at my home that I built many years ago when we first, a few years after we moved into this house. I have a gym here at my house, and I use the gym probably 5 or 6 times a week. That's how I do it for myself. I understand that most people don't have the luxury of having a gym in their homes, but stay physically active, stay physically engaged. Read plays, screenplays, find ways, novels, engage literature in order to keep your intellectual capacity as sharp and as engaged as you can. And when I say engage literature, it doesn't necessarily have to be a screenplay or a play, but I said read screenplays if you're an actor and plays, just from the standpoint of continuing to engage your intellectual, your creative capacities. That's how I would say you should try to remain as focused as possible. but I don't want to ignore just literature in general. Anything that engages your mind. A newspaper article. I read a fascinating article in the New York Times Magazine 3 weeks ago that really engaged me. But the answer to your question is stay physically in shape, as engaged as you can, as physically and intellectually engaged as you are able. That is the short answer. And
Akua, thanks you. Sorry, go ahead.
Know and trust that this period will pass and your skills, know and trust that this period will pass and your skills will be required of you. And at the time that your skill sets are required, you want to be ready. You don't want to have left anything to chance. Be ready.
Akua, thanks you for your answer. Says, I'm not an actor, but represent the British blacklist and speak to a lot of actors. So please pass on that great advice.
Wait. I'm sorry. If that's the Akua that interviewed me.
Akua Gimathi?
The blacklist. Akua.
Yes.
Akua.
Yeah.
How are you? And the few, now I can't see Akua, but can she see me at this point or no?
Yes.
Okay, Akua. How are you? I don't have to suggest to Akua, if it's the Akua that I think it is, that she remain engaged, because she is a brilliant individual. I know that she's incredibly engaged intellectually. And I will say to you, Akua, that I've really appreciated the communications that I've had with you that have been profoundly stimulating and engaging. So thank you, Akua.
And thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to your second question, but there's so many people wanting to ask questions, as I'm sure you'll understand, which brings us unbelievably to the final question. Now, Delroy has very generously told us about his journey from Southeast London to the summit of Hollywood. And the last question goes to...
I don't feel like I'm at the summit of Hollywood, but I understand why you're saying that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, judging by the chat box, everybody watching does today, and they thank you so much.
Let me say this. Even though I am at the summit of Hollywood, I still have to take out the trash.
Oh,
and I still have to go to the post office.
That keeps you humble. Coyote has the final question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to your younger self starting out as an actor, given what you know now?
Great question. Who's the person that asked that question?
Coyote.
Coyote?
Coyote.
Hayone.
K-A-Y-O-D-E. Olorum Femi. Coyote Olorum Femi.
All right. Great question, and thank you for that. The advice that I would give to my younger self is that it is not the industry that you're about to enter is not a meritocracy. Everybody speaks to everybody in this industry. So take care, particularly as a worker or as an aspiring worker of color. You will not get the same opportunities as others. So take particular care of how you comport yourself in this industry, and understand that everybody talks to everybody, so that you should not compromise yourself, but be aware at all times of how you comport yourself, how you present yourself. Because how you comport yourself and present yourself in a given working situation will be relayed to various others in the industry who will be told that story. And I'm going to be more specific. One of the missteps that I made as a young actor in not understanding that everybody talks to everybody. I was not always as strategic and as diplomatic as I should have been. Not to say, for instance, if I had a piece of material in front of me, a screenplay, a script that needed changing, that had changes that I felt needed to be made, rarely was I wrong in terms of how I was critiquing the material, but I was not always as diplomatic or as strategic in terms of how I communicated my displeasure. And that came back to bite me in the ass. That came back, I paid a price for that. So, without compromising one's values, always be aware of how you present yourself. And when you can be strategic and diplomatic, do that, as long as you are not compromising yourself. My mom, the elders always say, you can get more with honey than you can get with bitters. You can get more with honey than you can get with bitters. And that is very, very true.
Well, you've presented yourself perfectly today, and as co-chairman of BAFTA's Learning and New Talent Committee here in Los Angeles, I'm particularly grateful for the education and insight you have provided in these answers today. And to those of you who are saying the same thing in the chat box, that you'll remember this for always and how helpful it's been, I agree. So even though it's going to be just a virtual round of applause, I'm sure you're all clapping at home. And let me hand the final word to Delroy Lindo.
Thank you. When I was starting out as an actor, I was in the office of a casting director. And I hadn't done anything. I was just starting. And the casting director asked me, where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you see? Have we been disconnected, or am I still connected?
No, you're still connected. Yeah.
This casting director asked me, what do you see for yourself in 5 years? What do you want to be in 5 years? And I hadn't done anything. I was green. And I said words to the effect that, well, I'm not sure where I want to be, but whatever it is that I'm doing, I really want to be respected as an actor. And I think the question that the casting director asked me was, what are your aspirations for your career? It was something like that. And I said, whatever it is that I'm doing, I really want to be respected for my work as an actor. This young kid saying this to this casting director. And I'll never forget, she kind of rolled her eyes. It was subtle. It wasn't as pronounced as, oh God. It wasn't that, but there was a subtle rolling of the eyes. And she gave me some kind of sort of condescending response. But all these years later, now that I am at the pinnacle of Hollywood, cute. But no, all these years later, after having worked for the years that I have worked, I am respected for who I am as an actor. There are people who have worked with me that may not like me, that might think I'm a little bit of an a-hole. I don't know. Those people are in a minority, but generally, they may think I'm opinionated, which I can be, but broadly speaking, people have respect for me as an actor. And I say that because that means the world to me. And all of the various people listening to this presentation this morning who have said you will remember this, however this has impacted you positively, know that the positive impact that I may have had on you, you all have also had a positive impact on me, and an affirming impact, because these kinds of experiences are the fuel that I need, that all actors need, to go out and continue attempting to work. That is the fuel. That's what fuels me. And even though I am at the pinnacle of Hollywood, I still need that fuel to assist me in my creative journey. So thank you to all of you who have tuned in, and know that it really has meant the world to me to be here and to communicate, even though I can't see you. Thank you so much. And thank you to BAFTA. I appreciate it.
Keep saying yes to yourself. Goodbye from BAFTA. Thank you, Delroy Lindo. And thank you.
God bless. Thank you so much. Thank you.